Hey, what is going on, guys? I'm Bailey, back with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 very practical uses for your old phones. I think by now, in 2018, so many of us, maybe like myself, have a stack of old phones. These are all the old phones I used to have from my very first phone to the most recent old phone that I have, which is huge. I mean, I can't believe I used to actually use something this large. Anyways, a lot of people either A, recycle them. You can do that at like Best Buy or Target. I have never recycled any of my phones, mostly because I thought there was a use even for this possibly, so I held on to them. I don't know if that makes me a hoarder or if it just simply makes me insecure about recycling a device that has a lot of personal information on and just giving it up in the store. But that's just me. I never wanted to give up these because I always thought there might be a reasonable use for an old phone, and it turns out there are some. I actually do still use some of these devices around the house and maybe even out and about a little bit because they do have practical uses yet. So we're gonna go over 5 of them today, and hopefully at least one of them is helpful for you guys. This is gonna cover Android phones, a little bit on iPhones, mostly because I think it's going to overlap with the Android phones. And it's even going to cover, like I said, these really old Java-based phones that are just your simple old school phones. So let's get right into it. Number 1, drive Droid, or simply using your smartphone as a drive. Now, I believe this is possible on the iPhone, but I know it's possible on Android because I've tried it myself and actually used it with this old TrackPhone Android device. When I was modding my original Xbox, you'd have a very specific type of flash drive. It was a SanDisk Cruiser, and no other brand really worked very well. The Lexars didn't work, the Toshibas didn't work, and so forth. So rather than simply plugging this in, and this has 4 gigabytes of space, rather than simply plugging it in and getting the 4 gigabytes of space as a media unit, there's actually an app you can download called Drive Droid, where you can plug in the device, set it up as a virtual drive, put in all the specifications you want, even more specifications than you can put in when you're formatting a drive on your PC without using like an MS-DOS box type thing. So you're able to format the drive to create virtual memory on this device. So it had like 4 gigabytes of space. I said I'm gonna need about a gig. It allocated a gig of the storage space on this to an emulated drive that basically was the exact same as one of those old SanDisk Cruiser USBs that I would need to mod my Xbox. Now that's a very specific use for this, but you can obviously just make this be a flash drive. And this, with only 4 gigabytes of space, not really worth it. But if you do have a phone that's 64 gigabytes and upward, now we're talking. Now it's a little bit more worth it to plug this thing in, format it as a drive, and just use it that way. Number 2, using it as a Chromecast remote. I owned a Chromecast for about 2 days before I just decided that I'd be more likely to use my Xbox and actually use my Chromecast. Now, the biggest thing that tripped me up about the Chromecast was in order to actually cast information to the screen, you had to have a phone. Well, not everybody necessarily has a phone that's going to be using the Chromecast. Let me explain. If you have kids in your home that want to use the Chromecast, they want to watch Netflix on it or something, they can't pull out their phone and boom, turn on Netflix. So what I think is a very practical use for older Android phones is to use them as a remote. I actually did that with this one here. This is just an older Cricket ZTE phone, just a real cheap one that I put a bunch of the apps on for the Chromecast. I just left this on the mantle for the 2 days that I owned the Chromecast before I decided it wasn't practical that I was going to use it. And then anybody could just walk up to the TV, pick up this as the remote, and turn on the TV and start watching whatever they wanted using this. So then I didn't have to have all these apps downloaded on every single phone. Instead, they could all just be downloaded on here. And then even people that didn't have a phone in the house could use the Chromecast. Number 3, right here in the middle, this is probably my favorite: emulators. And I think a lot of people know that most smartphones can run emulators, but what they don't know is that even more practical than that is the Java phones can run emulators. I'm talking your, flip phones, your ones with the little QWERTY keyboards on like this. They can run emulators, and obviously not every emulator, but oftentimes Game Boy and Game Boy Color are compatible. I actually used to do that when I owned this phone, and then since then I've done it as well, because while the smartphone is great, right, for emulating your Game Boy games, it's much larger. The thing with this is there's physical buttons on here. This D-pad can be used, obviously, for the Game Boy, and then the middle button can be used for A. So if I'm playing a Game Boy or Game Boy Color game on this, it just feels more right to actually be pressing the buttons. There's expensive accessories that are sold for smartphones that give them button capabilities for when you're playing a ROM or an emulated Game Boy game. Yet instead, you could just pick up, a flip phone that you probably have in your house, install the Java-based Game Boy emulator on it, and then be just playing those games without having to buy some sort of expensive accessory. Number 4, and the one that I use every day, I use this phone still to this day, even though it's not my current phone, I use this as an alarm clock. The reason being is I hear so many people who use their actual phone as an alarm clock, and the next day they're like, oh, I forgot to plug it in, it's dead, or I got woken up at 2 a.m. because my phone went off because somebody butt dialed me. I don't understand why you don't just simply use an old phone. I don't have to worry about putting my current phone on airplane mode and plugging it in or worrying that somebody's going to call me or that it's going to light up. I just use this phone that has literally no service on, set the alarm on here, and then it goes off in the morning. I turn it off and I turn on my real phone. The other good thing about this is an LG, which most LG smartphones have the double tap feature, where if you tap it twice, it lights up the screen. My current phone is not an LG. It does not have that feature. That is an amazing feature for when you're laying in bed and you want to see what time it is. You just double tap. You don't even have to even find the buttons. You just double tap and the time comes up, and then you double tap and it turns off. That's much easier than trying to fumble for the buttons or whatnot. So I think that using an old phone as an alarm clock is such a practical idea that so many people are forgetting about. And number 5, a bit of the bonus, you could build your own sort of Apple CarPlay type system. This phone is humongous, and I think that by this point in time, a lot of people might have a humongous phone like this that is, they don't use anymore. So there is different types of dash mounts that you can get to replace a radio. You can take the radio out of your car. You can put in some sort of dash mount, or of course there's the much cheaper things that attach to like your fan area that just snap onto your dash that you can put this on. But if you have an old car like I do, a 2002, obviously there's no real smart car features for it. You could put this phone in there. You could install some, obviously pre-downloaded music. You wouldn't be able to, do any sort of streaming because it doesn't have service. But, if you had, the Spotify Premium or the Pandora Premium where you were able to download songs from there, or if you had just purchased a lot of music, you'd be able to put them on this device and then play them in the car. A lot of these also have radio capabilities. I know this one, in fact, it has a radio chip in it, so it can actually pull the radio just off of the radio receiver that's in here. It doesn't need cell phone service is the point. So I could maintain the use of my radio through this and then also use my downloaded music through this on a device that I would not have to take in and out of the car on a frequent basis. I could just leave this in there. In fact, I could just literally put this into the dash in place of the existing radio. Now, I've never built anything like that, but I do know that it is practical, it's possible, but it's not something that a lot of people are going to want to do. So I hope you guys found one of these 5 tips be something that you think you could do with your old phone. If not, obviously, just recycle it or sell it. If you do have, an iPhone, probably 6S and newer, it would definitely be worth selling it. And anything older than that, like your 4s and your 5s, probably are not worth selling anymore. The value just simply isn't there. And any of the off-brand Android phones like I showed you in this video, there's no practicality to trying to sell them. So it's either recycle them or find some sort of use for them like I did. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video and were able to take away one tip that you think you're going to use, leave it in the comment section. I would love to see what you guys think was the most valuable. I'll see you guys in the next video.